Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Help for the Guiltless. My name, of course, is Antoine, and I just happened to stumble across something today that comes from October 17th, 2017, and it's from our wonderful Australian lizard person in human form, Clementine Ford. Actually, that's an insult to the lizard people. I'm sure Alex Jones can enlighten us on what Clementine Ford really is. Anyway, the title of the article is quite simply, Having a Child Opened My Eyes to the Reality of Women's Domestic Lives. And that's because the fact that she got someone to impregnate her never crossed her mind. On top of that, she doesn't look at women's lives. She looks at ideal lives. Has nothing to do with the actual person. Before I get off on too much of a rant about the wonderful Miss Ford, let's jump into this, shall we? Dear Jess Rowe, the advice column letter began. We've recently employed a cleaner, but my husband says it's an indulgence. Not for me. I work full-time and I'm tired of being the one responsible for keeping our house tidy, doing all the cooking and getting the kids to bed. How can I deal with his snide comments about having help with cleaning? That's kind of a bullshit thing to do. Now, of course, the question does not delve into what the man does for work, or what time he works. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there, but we will set that aside. Rowe answered with characteristic aplomb, telling the anonymous writer that her investment was money well spent, as it means you can focus on what you enjoy doing when you're home instead of feeling resentful. She then advised the harried woman that she needed to have a calm chat with her husband and tell him you'd like him to help more. Which is a good response. The man may not know what he's doing. We are quite dense, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of nudity and sex dwelling around in our brain that you have to get through. Now, if they both can afford the help, I say let them have the help. Clementine, on the other hand, has a different idea. Reasonable advice, I suppose, although mine would have probably been a bit more blunt. Divorce him, because that's always the answer. Before you start writing angry letters to the editor demanding my man-hating self be turfed from the building, relax. That little thing there was what we call a joke. Of course, I'm not advocating the dissolution of a marriage and a family because one party is too lazy to do any of the work for himself. No, you're just wanting the dissolution of a family because you don't like men. The term man-hating actually fits you, Clementine. You hate men. If you look at the thumbnail of this video, there's a little text box there. Those are her actual tweets. No, has nothing to do with man-hating whatsoever. I'll continue. I'm advocating for the dissolution of a marriage and a family because this woman's husband is clearly a selfish dickhead who views his wife's job as secondary to her larger role as an unpaid domestic laborer, with the primary responsibility of facilitating his life, ambitions, and home comforts. I bet he expects her to do his laundry too. And this is where I bring in, what does the man do for work? Is he a construction worker? Does he work in the sewers? Is he a garbage man? Does he do any hard labor at all during the day? Now, if the answer to that is yes, then him wanting to go home and relax is something applicable. Now, I'm not taking away from this woman's job, but at the same time, we also don't know what her job is. Does she work in an office all day? Does she sit down all day? Is she a garbage man? Does she work in the sewer system? Does she work retail? These are questions that need to be answered before we can say it's all the man's fault. Now, because they can afford the help, I suggest they get it. If that's really what the problem is. Flat-out divorce is not the answer, and blaming the man is not the answer. The communication that Jess Rowe offered is a good idea. Actually, it's a great idea because then they both can talk about what they think is going on. The man may not know how tired she really is. That's what communication is for, Clementine. I know you're used to just screaming at your domestic partner and him bending over and taking it when you decide you're feeling a little frisky. But what happens with most couples is they communicate. They don't demand, they talk. These dynamics are all relatively new territory for me, because prior to my current relationship, I had never lived with a romantic partner. To say I'm surprised would be to like saying water is wet. And I have to say that should this relationship ever dissolve, I'll never live with another one again. Don't worry, your choices will be extremely limited as into who and what you can room with. Women who enjoy sex with men are much better off living alone and inviting them into their houses as guests occasionally when they feel like it. She doesn't want the sanctity of marriage. She wants a boy toy. That's why she has a domestic partner. They're never going to get married. She believes that women can sleep around as much as they want and still hold some relationship value. Now, if you want to throw your poontang around as much as you want to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that come around, that's fine by me. But when you meet that nice guy and he decides that your laundry list of people you've had sex with is too much for him to deal with, do not cry to me about your problems. Take your bowl of Ben and Jerry's, go sit in front of the telly, and watch some Univision, because that's the only thing that you are actually accomplishing. But one of the more gobsmacking things I've found since having a child is the sudden access and insight I've been given to the domestic lives of women all over mainstream Australia. No, you haven't. You've been open to your experience, not every woman in Australia. When I was pregnant, I signed up to be an expectant mother's online community, joining a forum with other women due at the same time as me. Through the months and months and months of pregnancy into the terrifying beyond of parenting, I looked on as women shared not only queries about Braxton Hicks and teething, but also intimate, vulnerable stories detailing the extensive emotional and domestic labor they perform in order to keep the tenuous balance of their families in check. But you only look at it from one side. Now, instead of just observing these women, if you would have interacted with them and found out, hey, their husband works 80 hours a week, he may want them to do a little bit more, or he doesn't have time to feed the baby when he's got to take a shower and go get ready for work. I'm not saying he shouldn't have to do these things. Get this right. At the same time, the mother also has to understand that daily life still has to go on. There is a balance that has to be reached, and it usually takes about the first year to get to it. There have been more stories than I can count of women whose partners cajoled them into sex either in the late stages of their pregnancies or early postpartum weeks, with many of the women tentatively asking each other how they could help their sucking partners to understand that they just didn't feel physically or emotionally up for it. The men are expressing the fact that they still desire the woman. It's caveman, I understand. But they want the woman to feel beautiful. And what better way than to tell the woman who is your domestic partner, your wife, the person you love, that even though they look harried, they look tired, they are not wearing the best clothes, they haven't showered in a week or so, they're leaking all over their blouses, that they're still attractive to you. And the fact that you said cajoled is really a thing. A lot of women get extremely horny during their pregnancy. I'm sorry you didn't experience it, because we also know that the area down below is as barren as the Sahara. But most women do enjoy sex with the men that they're having children with. As for postpartum, early postpartum weeks, okay, that's a bit much. The doctors actually say wait about 6 weeks if they've given birth vaginally for the stitches to heal. That's a little bit of a gray area. If you're going to be a dick and say you want sex 2 weeks after she's just given birth to your child, women, take it from me, punch him in the face. In July, Ginger Gorman wrote a harrowing report about the numbers of women who feel pressured to have penetrative sex shortly following childbirth. And while that is certainly more serious than the expectation that women in hetero partnerships keep house, it's part of the same canopy of labor enforced by gender divisions and sexism in the home. Again, women, if you have just given vaginal birth, whether with an epidural or natural, if the man within the first 2 weeks tries to force you into having sex, grab a hold of his testicles, twist them and yank, and then tell him that's what I experienced 2 weeks ago, only from the inside. If you want sex, wait. Most of the time, if they still love you after that, or still want to be with you, when they are fully healed, they're going to be more than ready. It has nothing to do with sexism in the home. Now, there are a lot of domestic partnerships that the raising of the child gets dictated to one or the other. And the reason for that is because one person's job is seen as more important than the other's. As I stated before, it works itself out within the first year. It's not sexism. How could it be sexism if 2 men are raising a child, or 2 women are raising a child, and both of them feel the same stress of starting something that they were never, ever prepared for? And yet, these kinds of conversations are also too easily shut down, because why would something as meaningless and petty as the unpaid labor performed by women in the detriment of themselves and the endless benefit of the men in their lives possibly be a topic worth discussing? Here's the problem, Clementine. You're calling them unpaid laborers. They're not, because they are in a relationship. Yes, one person gets more of the responsibility. If mummy is going to be breastfeeding, that's part of her job. Now, she can then drain herself into a bottle, and then the father can then feed the child. It's only when it is decidedly one-sided, in a few examples that you've given, that things like this happen. They're not unpaid laborers, because work at home and work in a relationship goes both ways. Fucking hell, Clementine. You're an idiot. You are a useful idiot for the cause that you believe is worth it. A cause that is not there. But it's not irrelevant. A 2016 study presented to the American Sociological Association found that most Americans still believe that women should be responsible for the majority of the cleaning, cooking, grocery shopping, and child rearing, even if the woman has a full-time job or makes more money than her partner. In fact, it's not uncommon for women who return to work after having children to feel especially pressured to make sure they can stay on top of things, because somehow showing your lazy husband that you can still keep his shirts ironed is the justification he needs to allow you to go out and earn a living. You are automatically assuming that the husband isn't doing something. This shows your sexism, your man-hatred, the fact that you believe that the person who is in the opposite side of this relationship is not pulling his own weight. You are giving examples that are one-sided. If the woman is the breadwinner and the man is secondary, in most adult relationships, Clementine, they work it out. The fact is, there are still overwhelming numbers of heterosexual partnerships where this kind of labor is enforced daily in both subtle and not so subtle ways. The problem encountered by our advice seeker, that of needing to out some of the work around her shared home to a professional and yet encountering opposition from the partner who is statistically far less likely to ever do it himself, is not uncommon. Whether one person is working or both, the idea that money is a luxury when it's spent on work women are supposed to do for free is widespread. Again, there is usually a division of what constitutes men work in the home and woman work in the home. We've all heard the jokes of the honey-do list. The honey-do list is a list of menial and most of the time physical tasks that the wife wants the man to do. This could be change brakes on the car, change the oil on his wife's car, repave the driveway, mow the lawn, repair the furniture, whatever it possibly could be, things that the wife does not think she is capable of doing. And when those are dictated to the man, that leaves certain other things dictated to the woman. Those are still both domestic tasks. It's just one is more physical than the other. Neither of them are doing it for free. They are making sure the relationship works, that daily life continues on going daily. But that it can be declared as such by someone who quite clearly has the luxury of not having to do the work either way is simply infuriating. Divorce him. Clementine, you're a harpy. You screech and crow and cry and scream at your domestic partner to get them to do what you want. You don't talk to them. How do I know this? Well, because of the way you talk about things. You expect your domestic partner, who I'm assuming is a male, to do everything you say, when you say it, how you say it. That is not a relationship. Well, not in the kind that you want. The kind that you're talking about. You're talking about a CEO talking to a new recruit. When you say jump, they say how high. That's not a relationship. That's boot camp. A real relationship, where two adults decide that they want to start a family, there's communication, understanding, and yes, sometimes arguments. Sometimes saying, hey, you're not pulling your weight these last couple months. Can you change that? In your case, I'm surprised your domestic partner is not in a cock cage, with you threatening to keep him there in chastity until he does exactly what you say. Next time you have some advice for people about domestic relationships, I have some advice for you. Please keep your mouth shut when the adults are talking. And those are my thoughts, folks. Thank you for listening. I'd love to know yours. Let me know in the comments. If you like what I do here, please hit like, share, and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you know when I upload. I'm going to leave a link to this article down below if you want to go through it yourself and read the comments or do whatever. If you'd like to follow me on any of the social medias, all the links are down below. So, once again, this has been Help for the Guildless. My name is, of course, Antoine. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, and have a wonderful evening.